Hello and welcome to the Data Flow Operators session. In this video, you will learn how to create an operator, its interface, and its contents. I will also explain you how to organize them into packages. Basically, an operator is a main subdivision of a SCADE model. It is equivalent to a function or a procedure in other languages. An operator communicates to the outside world through its interface. The SCADE language has a number of predefined operators, which are the building blocks to make higher-level operators. They are grouped by functionality. They can be mathematical, logical, or time operators. They are recognizable by their blue color in the graphical view. If you have some doubts about any of them, you can consult the SCADE Language Reference Manual. Let's go through the categories of operators. The mathematical operators include the basic mathematical operations, plus, minus, etc. Both arguments must be of the same type. For instance, you can add an integer and an integer. The logical operators are also standard, and, or, XOR, not. They apply to booleans. The time operators depend on which cycle is being executed and introduce the memory to the model. One of the time operators is called init. It is used to give a different value on the first cycle. The pre-operator acts as a one-cycle delay. If we look at the table to the second cycle, we output the value of f at the previous cycle, and the same goes for cycles 3 and 4. At the first cycle, there is no previous cycle, so the pre cannot output any value. If we try to compile a model with just a pre, there will be an error because the output is not defined at the first cycle. Instead, we need to combine the pre with an init operator to give a value at the first cycle. On this line, we see that we can put a pre not only to an input, but also on any expression that returns a flow. Finally, on this example, we see that if we combine more than a pre, we also need more initialization. Here we have a 2-cycle delay, but we only have defined an init for the first cycle. The followed by operator does both initialization and delay in one operation. Its inputs are, to the left, the flow that will be delayed, on the bottom left, the number of cycles by which the followed by should delay, and on the bottom right, the initial value. If we look at the table, we see that on the first 2 cycles, the initial value is the output, and on cycle 3, the input of cycle 1 is output. Comparison operators can compare 2 numerical values of the same type and return a boolean. The if-then-else operator selects one of the incoming flows and routes it to its output. If the flow coming from the top is true, the first pin will be selected. Otherwise, the second pin is selected. The if-then-else only selects one flow for routing. It does not decide whether the flows will be computed. In fact, in general, both flows will be computed. For example, in this picture, the 2 counters will be incremented at each cycle, and one of the 2 counts will be the output of the function. Let's have a look at more complex operators, the ones that operate on structured data. The first 2 are make and flatten. Make takes all the elements of a structure as inputs and outputs them in a structured form. On the bottom of the make is the name of the structured type. When you enter that name in the editor adds the correct number of inputs to the make. The reverse operation is a flatten. A flatten takes all the structured flow as an input and outputs each member of the structure as a separate output. Again, the name of the type figures at the bottom of the flatten operator. The next two operators are used to set or get an individual field of a structure. The assign operator takes as inputs a structured flow, a scalar flow, and the name of the field to be modified, and outputs a new structure with the corresponding field modified. The default behavior of the assign operator is that it takes a full copy of the input structure and modifies that copy, so it has a poor performance when it is used in series. The projection operator takes a structure and the name of a field and outputs the content of that field. For arrays types, the flatten, assign, and projection operate in a similar way, but the index of the array goes in place of the name of the field. In the basic projection that we have seen in the previous slide, the index of the element to be projected must be a constant. SCADE provides a separate, dynamic projection where the index can vary. The designer must provide a default value for when the index is out of bounds. Let's go to SCADE now. To create an operator, click on this button. And give it a name. The operator you just created is a user-defined operator. You will now have to define its behavior in the block diagram. Let's do a very simple addition, just to show you some pictures. So take the plus operator and move it to your workspace. After creating your operator, we open its properties window, and there we can modify the name of the operator and the file where it will be saved on the disk. If we open the second properties tab, we can define if the operator will have a memory, in which case it is a node, or no memory, in which case it is a function. Create two inputs and one output. Select them and drag and drop them to your workspace. Click on one input and verify in the properties window that it has the correct type. By default, it's a Boolean. Be careful of using the same types here. For example, if I want to add two reals together, I must then be careful when setting the values and remember that a real comes always with a dot to differentiate it from an integer. Now link these objects together. Look, when you pass on them, a small cycle appears. It's to make the connections. The next step is to create a package. A package is a way to group and organize operators with a command them. For example, when the number of operators in a given project becomes too large, you can organize them into packages. Or when you want to give the same name to two different operators, you can create a package. You can also try to create the packages at the beginning of your project, and then, inside, create your operators. To create a new package, go to the SCADE tab and right-click, Insert, Package. There can be several levels of imbricated packages. You can then drag and drop your operators inside